Oh, wow. I've got to get this right because high school counts. When my older daughter was in eighth grade, I realized that I needed to start planning for homeschooling high school, and that high school was different and it counted. Not like all the previous years of homeschooling didn't mean anything. We had been homeschooling her since second grade, but the fact that her coursework and grades would end up on a formal transcript that would be sent out to colleges, etc., gave me some apprehension. And I really didn't know where to begin. Does this sound familiar? You're feeling some trepidation and need to gain some clarity? Well, not to worry. This workshop series will lead you through 4 easy steps to map out a high school plan, basically an academic framework customized to your child. It will give you great clarity and build your confidence for homeschooling the high school years. Hey, I'm Kathleen Rumford, a former software engineer by education with a very logical mind, and I break down problems into smaller pieces in order to create a process to solve the problem. And that's what I did with planning out homeschooling high school for both my daughters, who I homeschooled over the course of 15 years, and I've since shared this process with many others, and now with you. Let me segue here to talk real quick about the Homeschooling Through High School Facebook group that I started a few years back for homeschooling parents of 6th to 12th graders to ask questions, get support, share opportunities, etc. One of the Facebook group membership questions I ask when people join is, what's something that is most on your mind with homeschooling the late middle school through high school age group? And many people respond that they want to make sure they don't miss anything, or they want to make sure that they get it right, or they want to make sure that they have courses and classes that will get their kids into college. They don't want to mess up their child's future, and they want to know how to create a great transcript. Sound familiar? Yep, those are the same things I was thinking during those years also. Well, this workshop will help give you clarity and confidence around those questions and more, and you'll finish up with a flexible framework for your teen's entire high school, all 4 years or however many years they have left, even if it's just 1 more year. And it's a flexible framework in that you're making some assumptions for the future that may change a bit as you get closer to that year. But you'll know how to pivot your plan to accommodate any changes. And as a side note, and it's pretty important, especially for those with kids in the later high school years who are college bound, the process you learn in this workshop can actually be applied to your students when they're entering college, whether it's community college, a 4-year university, or both, which is what my daughters did. With my daughter's input, I use this same step-by-step process to plan and map out their college academic frameworks so they could see what their 4-year flexible plan looked like, take an active role in helping to develop it, and take more ownership of it. Then, when they met with their college counselor, they took their plan with them and could speak intelligently about it. And when the counselor suggested some changes based on their experience and expertise, they could then just update the plan accordingly if they were both in agreement. This was very empowering for each of my daughters. It became more of a dialogue instead of just shaking their heads yes to whatever the counselor suggested because they had no idea. That active role and empowerment helped my daughters manage their college years more purposefully. Plus, they had to pay for 30% of their college expenses, room, board, and tuition. So they certainly had quite a bit of skin in the game. So let me share with you the 4 steps for creating your student's high school academic framework. Step 1 is called graduation requirements, where I walk you through how to determine the requirements for your own student. Now, a lot of people don't like the word requirements because it sounds inflexible or too strict or structured, but don't let that fool you. You have total control over what you determine is best for your unique child based on what they're considering as their next step after high school. Step 2 is called framework setup, where I'll walk you through how to create your student's 4-year framework of subjects per year based on the graduation requirements you determined in step 1. This is a bit like a fun and easy puzzle as you walk through each year and decide what subjects are best taken when. Most subjects will easily fall into the framework as you go through this step. Step 3 is called Courses That Fit, where you'll use the framework from step 2 and explore the classes, courses, curriculum you might use for each of the subjects per year, ones that fit your student as well as the framework. This is where you'll tap into the resources that you already know of, or you'll research recommendations from fellow homeschoolers and Facebook and Instagram homeschool groups in order to hang the courses onto the framework. Step 4 is called record keeping. Once you've gone through steps 1 through 3 and have your framework, also known as your student's academic plan or roadmap, filled in for your students' high school years, I'll walk you through record keeping for all of your students' classes, courses, so you know exactly what to record as each semester or year finishes. This will set you up beautifully for the creation of your student's transcript and their program of studies. Once you've gone through the record keeping video and your child is approaching 9th grade or later, you'll be ready for my transcript workshop. And as you go through the steps and create your child's high school academic framework, I encourage you to involve your student at different points in the process so they can provide input and help in the formation of their plan. They'll more likely take ownership of it if they're involved to some degree. So before you check out step 1, establishing graduation requirements, please like the video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss other videos related to homeschooling through high school. You may be thinking, so how do I even begin to create my high schooler's academic plan? Well, what I found the easiest was to start somewhere that had it all figured out, the public school. So let's dive into step 1, establishing your students' graduation requirements. This very simple step is going to reveal so much, really helpful for giving you the foundational pieces of your high schooler's plan. The objective is for you to take what you learn here and use that to determine your own students' graduation requirements. My recommendation is to create a spreadsheet file for this workshop like this, since this is the framework we're going to be using to start building out one step at a time as you go through the steps in this workshop series. You can easily create this yourself, but if you'd prefer, there is a link in the description to access the templates, the full workshop workbook, and the workshop videos all in one place. So where do I recommend that we start this process? The public schools, program of studies, and graduation requirements, because they have everything mapped out. I don't mean they have it all figured out or mapped out for your child, but they certainly have a robust framework you can take advantage of as a starting point. And we're going to take a look at some examples in a moment. But first, you may have noticed that I put the word requirements in quotes, and there's a reason for that. You may be wondering if you need to strictly follow your state's or county's graduation requirements. Nope, those are just guidelines for you. However, there are 2 things you'll want to check on before you create your student's academic framework. First, what does your state require with regard to homeschooling, and specifically for high school, if anything, that you need to be aware of? In my state, there weren't any restrictions about high school with regard to setting up my high schooler's plan or creating their transcript, but I did want to know what the state required for public high schoolers, like the newly added economics and personal finance requirement in 2015, since my girls would be competing with other graduates in our state for spots in colleges. Second, as early as possible, and this may not be right away, it's super helpful to have a sense of what your student is thinking of doing after high school. If it's college, there may be certain prerequisites that colleges have in general or for certain majors, which you'll want to include in your student's plan if you can. Or if they want to become an electrician or a hairstylist, etc., it would be helpful to know that. At the beginning of high school, everyone's framework may be pretty similar, but as your child progresses, their flexible plan can become more tailored to what they want to do after high school. So let me show you a few public school examples of state graduation requirements and programs of studies, because they have some great and helpful information you can use as you're creating your child's framework and planning their academic journey. I'm going to move pretty fast, but you'll get the gist and will understand how to explore this for your own state. Ready? Let's go. Okay, I wanted to show you Tennessee requirements to graduate high school. And I just popped this into Google, and this is what came up, 22 credits to graduate. And you click on here, and you can see what those 22 credits are comprised of: 4 maths, 4 English, 3 science, and so on. So it's pretty straightforward. And then for Colorado, something similar. I typed in Colorado 2023 graduation requirements, 22 credits to graduate and complete the senior capstone project, a year-long non-credit course required for graduation. So that's a little different. But I click on here and very clearly everything's mapped out as far as how many credits of each subject that a student would need to graduate in Colorado. Then we come over to North Carolina. I typed in North Carolina Program of Studies 2023. I'm just going to click on this one, Union County Public Schools. And we come into this document. It's going to have a lot of information, not quite as easy to navigate to get the graduation requirements, but it's definitely got some things I want to show you. So if we click on here for graduation requirements, we see that in North Carolina, they have 2 tracks. They have the Future Ready Core track and then the Future Ready Occupational track. So this is the track for people who are not going to college right after high school. They're going into employment, and this would be for those going into college. So if we look at these, we've got 4 Englishes, 4 maths, and same is true for the occupational, but they have a little bit different ones than the college ready needs to do. And then 3 sciences, 4 social studies, and it depends on what year the students entered high school. Health and PE, 1 credit, and world languages not required for graduation. And I do want to point that out because although there's no requirement, it does say that there are 2 world language courses of the same language required to meet the minimum University of North Carolina application requirement. So that's something that you would want to know for your state and what colleges your student may be interested in, what their requirements are so that you don't miss anything along the way. Other thing I want to show you is down here is the grading scale. So this grading scale is just the straight A, B, C, D, F, and here's the numerical values. I used this kind of scale for my first daughter, but then I went over to the plus and minus scale for my second daughter because I just did whatever our county did, and our county changed ours before my second daughter graduated. So the other thing I want to point out here is this is discussing weighting of grades and class rank. You don't care about class rank, but you do care about weighting of grades if your child is going to college, because colleges often want weighted and unweighted GPAs. So this shows you how things are weighted if your child takes an honors course or if they take an AP course versus a standard course. So an A for a standard course gets 4 points. For an honors course, it gets 4.5 points, and for an AP course or IB course gets 5 points. So that's where weighted GPAs come from, and that's something we'll talk about later. The other thing I want to show you is down here on page 30. These documents, this one I'm going to show you in the next one, has just a whole list of their course offerings and descriptions. So you can get a lot of information from here because there's a lot of courses that are offered in the public schools. So you do not need to just stick with the kind of the normal things. You can start looking and say, gosh, what would my student be interested in? Psychology, fashion, anatomy and physiology, hairstyling, engineering, robotics, forensic sciences, all kinds of stuff is listed in here. And it could be very helpful for you to get ideas for your student or have your student go through here and decide what might be interesting to them. All right, the last thing we're going to look at is this Loudoun County Public Schools, which is in Northern Virginia, 2023 graduation requirements. All right, it's not spelled right, but it brings us over here to this Loudoun County Public School Program of Studies. And the thing that I want to show you here is this grading scale is the one I use for my second daughter. And so you just determine which grading scale you want to use and go ahead and copy and paste it into the document or the spreadsheet that you're using to create the beginning part of your plan. And it's a really good idea for you to start thinking about what grading scale you want to use. And then the other thing I want to show you is down here where it talks about a standard unit of credit is earned by passing a course with 140 clock hours of instruction. And I included in my courses, whether it was instruction, homework, project time, whatever, 140 clock hours was a full year course. And that was really helpful to me because there were a couple times where I actually created courses for my daughter. She was doing something with graphic design, and as long as she had 140 clock hours of time into that, I counted it as a full year course. There is something called the Carnegie unit, and that's 120 clock hours. So some people use that for their high school. This is what our county had. So somewhere between 120 hours and 140 hours would be a full year course. 60 to 70 hours would be a semester course. So I think that could be helpful for you. And then there's discussion here on earning college credit while in high school, whether through AP classes, advanced placement, or through dual enrollment. So this is something else you want to explore. We'll talk more about that, but I wanted to show you that it's here in the program of studies. And then I want to go down to the graduation requirements for Loudoun County. Again, we have to dig a little bit to get there, but eventually I was able to find them, and it may be true with your county as well. But there's a standard diploma and an advanced diploma. So standard diploma is listed here. and it tells you what you need for the different subject areas for 22 credits. And then the Advanced Studies Diploma tells you what you need to get the Advanced Studies Diploma, and that's 26 credits totaling. So this was really helpful, and this is what we're going to use for the example that I'm showing you. I'm grabbing this information, this English 4, Math 4, Lab Science, and all that, and that's what I'm going to use to pop into our sample that I'm going to show you now. The reason I showed you those examples is so you can determine what your own student's course progression through high school might be and start brainstorming possible ideas for electives and such. And as long as you make sure you're meeting any of your own state's requirements for homeschooling, you can honestly start with whatever state's graduation requirements you like, since you're going to tailor them to your student anyway. Then you'll notate those requirements in your Excel or Google Sheets framework file. Okay, so for our example, we're going to use the advanced graduation requirements from Loudoun County Public Schools, which was the last example we looked at. Those included English 4 credits, Math 4 credits, Lab Science 4 credits, History and Social Sciences 4 credits, World Language 3, Health and PE 2, Arts, Career and Tech Ed 1, Economics and Personal Finance 1, and 3 electives. Looking at our sample file for the foundation of our plan, I've copied those graduation requirements into 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. I just copied the same exact requirements under each grade, which is what I'd like you to do using whatever requirements you've determined are a good fit for your student. Don't forget that this is flexible and customizable, and none of this is set in stone at this point. You're just taking action to start moving forward on this. Now, it may seem strange that we're copying the full graduation requirements into each year, but we'll narrow that down in step 2. I know this was a lot of info, so you may want to watch it again or just start digging around for your own state, which will really help make all of this clearer. And while you're exploring online, as I mentioned, it would be helpful to also copy and paste the grading scale you think you want to use into your spreadsheet that you're creating, maybe on a separate tab. Although you can change it later, once you start recording grades, it's best to stick with the grading scale you choose. So that's it for step 1. I encourage you to take some time to get these foundational graduation requirements set up for your student before moving on to step 2. Determining your homeschooler's high school plan is actually like a fun, easy puzzle. Graduation requirements are the foundational piece of this plan, which you are now going to frame out in step 2. Framework setup. Now, one thing we didn't talk about last time is the fact that for a variety of reasons, you might prefer to set up your framework sorted by subject rather than by grade, thinking that maybe is a better setup for your child's transcript. That is certainly valid, and you can decide if you want to set yours up like that now or rearrange things when you're ready to do your student's transcript, because much of what we're doing in this workshop will ultimately feed very easily into your student's transcript. Our objective for step 2 is to determine what subjects will be taken each year or semester. It will be kind of fun if you like little puzzles. We'll just mark down for each school year which subjects the student will be fulfilling the required full credit or half credit. So here's where we left off with the advanced diploma requirements mapped into 9th through 12th grade of our sample file. We see for English, Math, Lab Science, and History, or Social Sciences, that they each require 4 credits of coursework. So it should be pretty easy to map those across 4 years, 1 credit per year for each subject. However, if your student has already taken a high school math or a world language in 7th or 8th grade or both, you'll want to include that first because that will make a difference in how we set up the credits for all 4 years. So let's say our sample student has already taken a full credit Algebra 1 and a full credit Spanish 1. We'll just pop those in here, and you can do the same for whatever courses make sense for your student, and you'll want to mark those with a 1 if it's a full credit or a 0.5 if it's a half credit. Now this brings up the point we briefly touched upon in the last video. How do you determine if something is a full credit or a half a credit? One method is you can use the number of hours method, number of hours of instruction, homework, projects, etc. And if they roughly total 120 to 140 hours, you'd count that as a 1 credit or a full credit. 60 to 70 hours would be half a credit. Alternatively, or in addition to the hours method, for example, with Spanish 1, I would suggest that if the class your child took incorporated all of the content of a typical full year Spanish class, then that would count as 1 credit. Now we'll review this again in step 3, but that's kind of the basis. So back to our example, we can easily notate 1 credit per year for English, science, and history. And since one of the math credits has already been taken in 8th grade, we'll want to determine how to map the remaining 3 math credits. For now, I'm just going to map them into 9th, 10th, and 11th grade so that the student doesn't lose momentum on their math. If we know that our student is going into engineering or something that requires calculus or a lot of math, you'd consider adding another in 12th grade, but you can leave it for now so that we just get the requirements framed up. Afterwards, you can review this with your student and get some of their input before adding additional classes and credits. For world language, since they already have 1 credit from 8th grade, we'll map the remaining 2 credits into 9th and 10th grade, and we'll be done with that requirement. But again, this student may want to take another year or 2 of Spanish, which is what my daughter did, but that's something to talk over with the student for their input. Now looking at health and PE, which requires 2 credits, this sample student could do a full credit in freshman year and a full credit in sophomore year, or leave them till the end. They could even count summer swim team, hiking club, and their sports practices and games as a PE credit or half credit. But for our example, I'm just going to guess for now and say they're going to do a half credit, which is 60 to 70 hours of health and or PE each year. Remember that they can fulfill the entire 60 to 70 hours in 1 semester, or they can spread it across the entire year, but it will still only count as half a credit due to the number of hours. Okay, and then the fine arts, career, and technical ed subject, 1 credit, and it's going to depend on your student and what they're interested in. Maybe they want to do an automotive course or a graphic design course, photography, sculpture, metalworking, woodshop, robotics. It really depends on your student. But we're going to say in this example that they're going to do a half credit in 9th grade and half credit in 10th grade of whatever they choose. We're not determining what course they're taking at this time. We're just allocating our requirements across the years. We'll determine courses in step 3. Okay, we've got economics and personal finance, which are required in a number of states, including my state. We can allocate that to 11th grade, 12th grade, or split it up. For our student, our sample student, I'm going to say half credit personal finance in 11th grade and half credit economics in 12th grade. Then for electives, we'll put 1 in 11th grade and 2 in 12th grade. You can still add a couple more classes if your student can handle them. And we haven't talked about honors classes or dual enrollment yet, but we'll go into all of those things more deeply on step 3, courses that fit. So let's do a sanity check to make sure we didn't overload or underload any years. We've got 6 credits in 9th grade plus the 2 from 8th grade, 6 credits in 10th, 6 in 11th, and 6 in 12th. So we've got all 26 advanced diploma credits accounted for, which is great. That was fun, right? Maybe I'm just a nerd. So that's it for step 2. You're just setting up the flexible framework for your student, taking a first crack at it, getting your plan ready to hang some courses onto or plug some courses into. And I encourage you to take the time as soon as possible to map the subject credits into the years you expect your student will be taking them before moving on to step 3, where you'll be able to adjust things if needed. And when you're ready, check out step 3, courses that fit, and I'll see you over there. Hanging courses onto your student's high school academic framework that you've now created is going to explode your confidence for homeschooling high school. So we've now covered steps 1 and 2 in creating your high schooler's academic plan, establishing graduation requirements, and determining which subjects will be taken when during high school and what would be taken as a full credit course or a half credit course. Those were the very easy steps leading up to actually hanging courses and classes onto the framework, which is where we are today in step 3, courses that fit. And as any homeschooler knows, choosing curriculum, courses, classes, etc. can be challenging because there is so much out there. And you need to evaluate what's best for your student in terms of content, delivery method, parental involvement, etc. So our objective for this video lesson is to identify viable courses for each of the subject areas across the 4 years as best as we can at this point, without necessarily getting ultra specific. Remember, this is a flexible framework, and the years that are still further out won't be as nailed down as those that are coming up. To make sure you don't miss any videos on homeschooling high school, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. By you liking and or subscribing, even commenting, you're telling YouTube that this was valuable and they'll push it out to more homeschoolers to watch. So let's click over to our next framework file, and you can see that we have 2 column headings we'll need for step 3, course name and course type. You should have those in your student file also. I'm just going to start plugging in some courses or hanging some courses onto the framework that makes sense for this particular student, and you're going to do the same for your student. But before we do anything, let's quickly look at what I pulled from Virginia's graduation requirements and North Carolina's grad requirements that we looked at in the previous Step 1 lesson on graduation requirements. I want to show you what they each say for science and history in their notes, but there are specifics for other subject areas as well that may be helpful for you to check out. For science, North Carolina's guidelines have physical science, biology, and earth or environmental science, no chemistry. Virginia's guidelines have earth science, biology, chemistry, and physics. For history, North Carolina has state and U.S. history, American history, world history, and econ personal finance, while Virginia has state and U.S. history, state and U.S. government, which I think is important, and 2 courses in world history or geography or both. Now, you don't have to follow state guidelines unless your state says you have to. But for me, as I was just starting out and trying to figure everything out, I thought, well, why not? There's some flexibility built into the specifications. They're not stringent. And since my daughters would be competing for spots in college with others in our county and state, I figured this was a good starting point. And we just see where we landed by the end of high school. You can determine for yourself if you want to do the same thing with whatever graduation requirements you're using. I just found this to be super helpful. So let's look at English for 9th grade for our sample students framework. We've set it up so they need to fulfill 1 English credit in 9th grade. So I'm just calling this English 9. You don't need to be ultra specific right now as to what English 9 means, but you'll most likely want to identify your specific courses for the next year by the spring of the previous year. So the spring of 8th grade, you're starting to nail down your 9th grade classes, including what English 9 specifically entails. Courses that you're paying an outside teacher for, doing online, or maybe in a hybrid model with a local school, or even as a co-op, you're most likely figuring those out in the spring. If you're going to be the one teaching the class yourself, I recommend that you first research options and opportunities online and maybe use Kathy Duffy's curriculum guide, which I've linked in the description, so you can narrow things down. You can also ask questions about curriculum in Facebook or Instagram groups, which most of you already know. Then you can touch and feel curriculum at state homeschool conventions with curriculum vendors, local used curriculum sales, local homeschool support groups where you might be able to borrow curriculum for a weekend to examine. You can also craft your own classes. For example, my daughter was really into graphic design, and we had already purchased the Adobe suite of software for a community college web design class. So she then used that software to teach herself Adobe Photoshop, Lightroom, and InDesign, and began designing t-shirts for our church mission trips. She spent way more than 140 hours on all of that, so we counted that as 1 credit art course. Okay, so back to our sample students framework. For the math, the next step in the Saxon math progression is geometry, so that's what we'll note here. We're choosing to be specific since our student has already started with Saxon. And then we need a lab science. So we're just going to note physical science here because my student already did earth science in 8th grade. For history, the recommendation is state and U.S. history, state and U.S. government, and 2 courses in either world history or geography, or both. So I'm calling this World History 1. For world language, our natural progression is Spanish 2. For health and PE, we talked about doing a 60 to 70 hour class in 9th grade, and then a 60 to 70 hour class for art of some kind. Again, I'm not getting specific here, although I imagine if you're going through this exercise, you probably have some specific classes already chosen for 9th grade. Now, to speed things up for 10th through 12th grades, let me pull a filled-in framework so we can move through that more quickly. For 10th grade English, I'm suggesting American literature. We've got Saxon Algebra 2, which is next in the Saxon progression, biology, World History 2, Spanish 3. We're doing that half credit of health and PE, 60 to 70 hours, and the same for the fine arts, career, or tech ed. I'm proposing art 2, but it could be an automotive class, electrician class, sculpture class, or something like that. It could be anything in that subject area. In 11th grade, English 11, I'm saying British literature. For math, Saxon advanced math. For lab science, I'm saying chemistry. For history, I'm saying U.S. history and state history, and Spanish 4. Now, they've already satisfied 3 world language credits, but in this example, my sample student wants to take Spanish again. This is where the flexibility of the framework comes in, because things will most likely change a bit from the original as time progresses and as you or your student learn new things or other opportunities open up. For health and PE, we previously had said a half a credit here and in 12th grade, but I, the parent, heard about a great dual enrolled health course that had to do with camping and hiking that my student would love. And when I talked to them about it, they said, yeah, they'd love to do that. So I'm actually going to do a full credit health and PE dual enrolled course in the 11th grade. Now, this did actually happen to me for my second daughter, but we didn't know about the course until 10th grade when we were getting more specific about 11th grade. Something I want to point out and make super clear, this is super, super important, is that a dual enrolled college semester class is equivalent to a full year high school class from a credit standpoint. So for example, the dual enrolled health camping hiking class is only a semester, but it's going to count as a full high school credit. Homeschoolers can get through a lot of coursework in 11th or 12th grade by dual enrolling because their semester course counts as a full high school course. So that's really important to understand. Okay, and then a computer science elective finishes out 11th grade, although for some states, certain computer science classes can be considered a math or a science course. Then in 12th grade, dual enrolled English, because why not? Get college credit and fulfill a high school credit at the same time, right? And remember, this is only a semester-long English 101 college class that is going to fulfill a full high school English credit. I didn't have a math originally here, but my sample student decided to take dual enrolled calculus at the community college. Also dual enrolled physics, AP US government, economics, they could do as dual enrolled, but in this case, we're choosing not to because my sample student likes the economics teacher at our local co-op. And personal finance is a class that they're doing with a homeschool teacher as well. Such a critical class for high schoolers to have, in my opinion. And then 2 electives left. I pulled out just some of the electives from the Loudoun County Public Schools Program of Studies for you to see here. The state program of studies can give you ideas of what your student might want to explore to gain some more breadth to their coursework. You can also take a look at the community college course listing for ideas because your student may want to take their electives at the community college or online if they're not locally available as a traditional homeschool class. Check out my video on earning college credit in high school for more insights into dual enrollment, choosing teachers, AP classes, and CLEP tests. So our sample student has chosen to do aerospace and robotics because they're interested in engineering, but they really could be anything for their electives. Now, you're not necessarily going to be that specific for 11th and 12th grade classes if your child is in 8th or 9th grade, but you'll get more specific when you update your plan as you approach the upcoming years. And do I think you should keep this plan up to date? Yes, because this is where I'm going to suggest you keep your grades also. When you're ready, check out step 4, record keeping, and I'll see you over there. Your student's academic plan is the gateway to easily creating their transcript, and record keeping is the validation of all their hard work. So now you've covered steps 1 through 3 in creating your high schooler's academic plan, establishing graduation requirements, setting up their framework with their subjects and credits, and fitting courses or classes into that framework. Step 4, record keeping, is the final piece in this planning puzzle, and it goes way beyond just keeping grades. It's the validation of all your students' hard work. Hey, I'm Kathleen Rumford, homeschooler of 15 years through the high school years and dual enrollment. And in less than 45 minutes, we'll have walked through what took me weeks to figure out. So I pray that this has been a blessing to you and your homeschooler. My transcript workshop does the same. In 90 minutes, you will learn what took me years really to figure out. Plus, I include lots of templates so everything is streamlined for you, saving you loads of time and frustration. Stay with me to the end and I'll provide a summary of what that workshop entails along with a discount code for you to take advantage of for a limited time. So to finish off the high school planning series, our objective for this step 4 record keeping video lesson is threefold. First, notating whether a class is an advanced class or not, notating actual grades and credits earned, and compiling your students' program of studies. These are needed for your students' transcript, their GPA calculations, and as documentation to validate what they've achieved in their high school years. Okay, so our first objective is notating whether your students' classes are standard classes or advanced classes like honors, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, dual enrolled, or CLEP. You'll be updating your high schooler's plan every semester or every year with this information along with your students' grades. And don't forget, you'll also be updating the plan with specific course names as you make final decisions for classes or courses that your student will be taking the following year. You can easily do all of this at the same time. So let's revisit our sample students framework spreadsheet file where we left off in step 3. Hopefully at this point, you've finished step 3 and have classes or courses hung onto your students' framework as well. All we're going to be doing here is using the GPA codes to notate any advanced coursework that our sample student is planning to take, is taking, or has already completed. So I'm saying, okay, my child's in 8th grade. I'm setting them up for an English 9 honors course that my friends' kids have taken and loved. So I'm putting honors here. World History 1 honors because my child is taking it with an outside teacher and they've designated it as honors because it's more rigorous, goes into more depth, and requires more from my student. Now, fast forward in time, and I'm able to update my plan with not just specific class names, but with these codes as well. English 10 is going to be American Lit honors with a rigorous outside teacher, and the same for World History 2 honors. And then coming down here to 11th grade, for English 11, they're going to do British Literature honors. And Health and PE, I mentioned that this is going to be a dual enrolled semester course over at the community college. And then the computer science semester-long class is going to be Intro to Computer Science, dual enrolled at the community college, so they can get college credit here in 11th grade and satisfy a full high school elective credit as well. And then finally in 12th grade, English, dual enrolled, calculus, dual enrolled, physics, CLEP, because they took a rigorous high school course on their own, but think they can CLEP out of the college level course. Again, we'll go into more depth on these types of things in my transcript workshop and in my video on earning college credit in high school. For US government, it's going to be an AP class. You can create an AP course through the College Board, collegeboard.com. Then for economics, they're taking it as a standard class, but they could dual enroll for macroeconomics and or microeconomics at the community college if they're up for it and if their math is up for it, which is what my daughter did and she loved it. And then aerospace and robotics, we're saying dual enrolled for both of those electives at the community college or another local college or an online college, but dual enrolled at some college level. This will be a very rigorous year due to the number of AP, CLEP, and dual enrolled courses. So hopefully this sample student will earn 6 college credits for this one school year if they score high enough on the AP exam and the CLEP test. In my experience, homeschooling my girls, CLEP tests and AP exams are less foolproof than taking and passing similar dual enrolled courses in terms of earning college credit. Phew, all right, so this flexible framework is giving you a starting point, but also a glimpse ahead. So your eyes and ears are open as your students are going through the year. You might hear things from people or you're doing some research. You're more open and aware to what's possible for future years. And you can make tweaks and updates to your academic plan and framework all along the way. Okay, so our second objective in this lesson is to review the recording of grades and credits earned, which is critical for the transcript and in calculating GPAs. This is the final piece to the student framework file. We have 2 new column headings for grades and credits, and as your student completes coursework, my recommendation is to record their grades and credits earned in this file. So once they're done with their 8th grade high school level classes, you'll enter their grades, credits, and GPA codes if they have any. And then when they're done with their 9th grade classes, you'll do the same and so on through 12th grade. And although we included the number of credits in this column, that was for planning purposes. When you record the credits here, these are actual credits earned. Now, a great question I often get is whether you should record a letter grade or a numerical grade. Ultimately, you'll most likely want to record a letter grade, but if your student is still in 8th or 9th grade or isn't going to college and you don't need a weighted GPA, then perhaps you just leave the grades as numerical. That's going to be up to you. And I always recommend that you hold on to numerical grades for future reference. I was always a bit wary that a college might ask me how a grade was calculated, so I held on to anything that was used in calculating grades, whether by me or an outside teacher. I didn't worry about any dual enrolled courses, CLEPs, IBs, or APs, since you'd have documentation from the college or College Board or the CLEP organization, which we sent to the college as part of the application. So although you could just put numerical grades in here to start, when you want to calculate GPAs and finish up your transcript, I recommend using letter grades using the grading scale that you've decided upon. So that's really it for grades. Every year or every semester, you'll just update your plan with your students' grades and credits earned, which will ultimately feed nicely into their transcript and GPAs. And that brings us to our third and final objective for this lesson, creating and updating your students' program of studies all throughout their high school years. You can easily create this yourself, but if you'd prefer, there is a link in the description to access this full workshop series, student academic framework template, the program of studies template, the reading list template, and the full workshop workbook all in one place, but you can determine what works best for you. So let's take a look at the program of studies template that I'm strongly suggesting that you create in 8th or 9th grade and then keep up to date throughout the high school years. Basically, this will be a compilation of all your students' high school classes with a course description, who the instructor was, what subject requirement they were satisfying, what text they used, how the grades were calculated, etc. Whatever would document each course, not only for your student, but for prospective college admissions to get an understanding of what your student took over their high school years. This program of studies template mirrors the way I set up the academic plan from steps 1 through 3 by grade. But if your student's high school plan is by subject and your transcript will be by subject, I recommend setting up your program of studies by subject. So for our example, Algebra 1 was taken in 8th grade. I used 8A and 8B to designate first and second semesters in 8th grade. They earned 1 high school credit. Similarly, for Spanish 1, I notated the same. And then I go into the 9th grade classes, English 9 honors, Algebra 2, and so on. And I'm listing who the instructor was and a bit about the class, whether you write that up or you get a description from an outside teacher. For English classes, I would recommend including literature, novels, poems, short stories, whatever they're reading, because it's really helpful for the college admissions people to see that. They would also want to know what kind of writing the student focused on, etc. For Saxon Algebra 2, you can pull the description from an online site and copy and paste it into the description here. You can also include how grades were calculated. World History 1 honors, who taught that, what was it about, texts, how was it graded, physical science with lab, who was the instructor, what topics were included. Again, this can come right from a book description or from the resources that you used or the outside teacher used. And then Spanish 2, Health and PE, which was a half credit due to estimating it as a 60 to 70 hour class, you'd want to include a description of what they focused on in that class. And then the same thing for this art class, Intro to Digital Photography. Again, it was a half credit course that our sample student took, and I'd include a description, list of materials, etc., and grade calculation percentages. And then when your student gets into 10th grade and you know what classes they're taking, you can update their high school plan with their 10th grade list of courses and update their program of studies. Not all universities will require this, so you'll want to check with the colleges that your student is interested in, but I recommend keeping this because it adds credibility to and validation of the homeschool transcripts. It also encapsulates all your students' high school coursework in one place, which is really a gift for your student to have at some point. All right, so what else do you need? I recommend you keep a high school reading list of whatever your student reads as part of their coursework or just for fun. Colleges may request this. And keep track of extracurricular activities like clubs, employment, sports teams, volunteer work, etc. I go into this more in the transcript workshop. Keeping everything we've been talking about in one folder on your computer or Google Drive or OneDrive will allow you to stay organized and easily access your records when it's time to create your student's transcript and documentation for colleges. Now, no matter where your student is in their high school journey, you may want to consider taking my 4-step transcript workshop, which covers GPA calculations, both weighted and unweighted by grade and cumulative across grades, the transcript creation. It covers how to provide the colleges with validation of your students' records, since they may be wary of what they're receiving from a homeschool parent, and then how to pull everything together into a comprehensive student packet to send to colleges. And of course, it includes my GPA calculator and templates of the 1-page transcript by year, the program of studies template, the reading list template, the validation documents, and the comprehensive student packet template. And you won't lose access to this course. So even if your student is in 8th or 9th grade, you can go through the course now to pick up helpful tips and then revisit the course when you're ready to create the transcript. I provided a link and a limited time discount code to the transcript workshop in the description. Now, has this workshop increased your clarity and confidence in creating your student's plan and keeping things up to date throughout the years? Honestly, what you've accomplished will empower you and them for their high school journey. If you found this video helpful, please like the video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss anything related to homeschooling high school. And until next time, take care and God bless.